Right, hello, hello. I hear sound in my headphones. Let's see how this is going for everyone else. Always looking over at the wife for the thumbs up. She can hear me. I got the thumbs up, the green light. All right, cool. Hello, everyone. Today we're exploring Kenai Fjords, which I very much mispronounced last week. Take these off real quick. You can hear myself speak into them. It's always a little unsettling. Um, so here we are at the start of our flight plan in beautiful Alaska. Looks like we have another uh, flyer along with us this week. Let me see if I can turn on these name tags real quick. Oh, nameplates are on. Well, we'll see who it is in a minute. Xbox Master, hiya there. Glad to have you. Um, so before we, hey there, Fractals. Before we dive in, a couple quick administrative updates. One exciting piece of national park news. The new River Gorge National Park was just signed as a new national park on, let's see, Sunday, 2 days ago. It was part of the bill that was just passed. So if you're uh, excited about national park news like me, then this is kind of big news. I pulled up a picture actually. I'll show you real quick before we get rolling here. Let people kind of settle in. So this is kind of what the park looks like. I believe it's in West Virginia, but it's occurring to me that the list of national parks is technically unbounded. So we'll do it week by week as we get going. But we will add that to the list. I did not include it for immediately because I want to give them a little bit of time to get their national park legs under them. Yeah, sup, Scott. Thank you, Fractals. Yep, the flight plan's up there if you're interested in joining. I also changed one other thing this week. So I turned on what are called waypoints in the game. So if I rotate here, you can see off in the distance, it says the name of the waypoint. When I post these plans online, this is one of the features that people like to use with it. So I figure I might as well use it myself. It's kind of cool. If it's distracting, let me know either in the chat or in the surveys afterwards. Um, but it's kind of a useful way to see where you're going. I actually did a flight in this park at night a couple of days ago using the waypoints, and that was really fun. So would highly recommend that. Thank you, Fractals. So for those of you without the Microsoft 20 Flight Simulator 2020, there's a way you can see where I am, this flight tracker. So go ahead and pull that up if you're curious to kind of navigate around and see it relative to my headphones on how to have it. All right, what do you say we take off here? So let's see if I can get this plane going. So today we are flying oops, let's pop in. Okay, there we go. Today we are flying ooh, that's kind of unsettling. Hey there, Xbox Master. Um, what's called a Zlin Savage Cub. Zlin is the name of the company, and then the Savage Cub is the type of plane. It's modeled after the Piper Cub, which is a classic plane. You may recognize the design, kind of a quintessential one. So we'll be doing this around. It's got nice big windows all over the place, so we can look all around Kenai Fjords, which we will be entering in just a little bit. So we're kind of off to the side still here. Speaking of which, I can show you where we're going a bit. So as we turn ourselves around here and climb a little bit, it works. Thank you. Okay, awesome. Glad to hear it. Critter Casey, uh, Stacy. Yes, Alaska. Beautiful, beautiful Alaska. So while we're getting turned around here, let me pull up the big screen iPad and we can look at where this is relative to the rest of the world. So here we are in beautiful Alaska, and if we zoom in, Kenai Fjords is just around this area. I have my Kenai Fjords National Park map overlaid, which if you have ForeFlight, I highly recommend. And we'll be entering kind of the southwestern part of the park and then fly up to the northeast along the fjords. So first stop, just taking off and going up the Nuka River. So this is sort of the getting into the park. All right, let's flip back here. We can take a look around. The whole park is beautiful. I did grab a couple of videos, and I worry about covering up the park with them while we're going. So let me know if it's useful, too much, too little. Doubt many people have been to this one. Yeah, Fractals. I was a little surprised on a couple of things with this park, but one of the things is that it's one of the smaller parks in Alaska. Most of them are huge, and this one's actually smaller than Yosemite, where we went last week. Um, which I found very, very surprising. All right, what are the straw poll results there? Not yet. All 6 votes for not yet. Yeah, I'm in that same camp. I have not been to Kenai Fjords before. I did find out that um, it's a popular destination for cruises. So I didn't choose cruises for a topic this week, but it was definitely on the table as a potential option. So if you're thinking about an Alaskan cruise, this is one of the ones. And I'll show you the bay that people often go visit if they're on a cruise. A fun thing to do there. All right. Speaking of, let's do a quick little intro to the stream while people get to Fractal's question on Alaska. Be curious if people have been up there. I've never been to Alaska. So for those of you who are new, each week we'll pick a new national park to explore together. We'll visit some of the key attractions, talk about the park and its history, and enjoy the beautiful views from the sky. This week we're exploring Kenai Fjords National Park. For those of you with a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator, such as Xbox Master off there in the distance, I've uploaded the flight plan for you to tag along. So feel free to go and explore, dive into the nooks and crannies. Yeah, you are welcome to deviate from the flight plan as much as you want to. A little disclaimer, yes, I am a pilot, but we'll be taking full advantage of the simulation today, so don't try any of this at home or in your own airplane. Other bit of background information, I've researched the park in preparation and added anything useful with sources to the National Park Wiki page. This is done for a couple of reasons. One, it's the best possible way to make sure that the facts are checked by others. All the information at least gets reviewed by peers at some level. It's also a way to give back to a living body of knowledge. So, and something that'll last beyond our hour here together. To that end, if you notice anything incorrect or needs to be updated or clarified, please feel free to fix the wiki page. As the wiki community often says, be bold and make the updates. Also, let me see. Oh yeah, before I forget, we'll vote for the next national park. So we chose this one last week. We'll choose our next national park towards the end. So make sure to look for that in the chat coming out in a little while. All right, I'm gonna focus on flying this plane for just a moment here because I've sort of deviated from my my intended route. Kenai Fjords is a mountainous area with surprisingly high elevations. The Herding ice field we'll talk about in just a second goes about 5,000 feet up. So let me do this real quick. One of the things that I really like about this park is they did a really good job with making sure that the sorry, I totally clicked on the wrong thing and then disoriented myself. Okay, that's what I want to do. Got Chrome up. Is they did a really good job with some of their kind of background information pieces. So I'm gonna actually pull up this and play you the Kenai Fjords video that they put together.
Park. Perched on the northwestern edge of the continent is a place where mountains, ice, and ocean meet, and all are in a constant state of transformation. From season to season, even from day to day, the raw process of change is ongoing, unfolding before our very eyes.
Northwestern Glacier, when I first came out here, was a 300-foot wall of ice dumping icebergs into the fjord. Now it's receded a couple miles and you can paddle up the fjord in areas that were once buried under hundreds of feet of ice. And the fact that something that massive and powerful can change in your lifetime is just an impressive quality of this landscape.
The Harding Ice Field sits at the top of the park, covering 800 square miles of the Kenai Mountains. And where tidewater glaciers spill off the ice field and calve into the ocean, a convergence of glacial melt, salt water, sunlight, tides, and currents creates a nutrient-rich environment for phytoplankton to bloom. This is the basis of the fjord's entire food web, supporting seabirds and other marine life from the tiniest zooplankton to 45-ton humpback whales. And onshore, rainstorms nurture giant stands of Sitka spruce in the northernmost edge of North America's temperate rainforest. The forest has grown tall in the path of glacial retreat. Just 100 years ago, The glaciers at Kenai Fjords reached far beyond where they end today. As a visitor to the park, you can witness this dynamic change. You can walk up to Exit Glacier and see its path of retreat. You can hear the thunderous sounds of icebergs tumbling into Ayalik Bay. And you can appreciate for yourself the rich wildness that is Kenai Fjords National Park.
Right, so I love that overview of the park, and it really touches on what I think are some of the most important aspects of it. We'll do a little bit more of a deep dive on it in a minute, well, throughout the rest of the hour. But I finished writing up this sort of intro and editing the wiki page. I usually edit the lead section to make it really really concise. And then I found that video, and it was like, oh, okay, well, this is exactly what I wanted to say. So I won't reiterate any of the stuff in there, except to point out a really important piece of it, which is this hurting ice field. So the park itself. Um, well, let me check the chat because I'm sadly I've not been up there. Fractals, you gotta go visit your uncle and invite me along. That would be fun. Could do an Alaska cruise or something. I'm Rosno. Not yet. Yep. Gotta get up to Alaska. I have not either. I really want to go. Um, do you think you could go to the mountain range forest that inspired Avatar? 2006 next time. It's a national park in China. I love that idea. I typically so for this series I've been doing Grey Wolf. I've been doing United States national parks primarily. So my focus, at least for the next uh, 55 weeks or so, will be around those. Really trying to learn about the parks um, in the United States, but in the future, potentially, yeah, I love the idea of going to other countries' national parks. Actually, researching Kenai Fjords, I kept ending up in Chile and Norway and Sweden because the fjords in those areas are really really good, cool examples. I have some pictures I'll show you later. Actually, that's kind of along that. So love the idea, um, but maybe a little while down the road. Um, yeah, Last Airbender fan myself. Nice. Um, Okay, so hurting Icefield, that big one that they mentioned, and they had that really cool picture with the kind of mount peak sticking out, is primarily what the park is protecting. So that, and then all of the mountains and excuse me, fjords and the coastline that are created by those fjords. The Icefield itself creates about 38 glaciers, the largest of which is Bear Glacier, and we'll go and see them. But if you look on this map, you can see the entire coast is just uh, completely filled with these fjords up and down. So we'll fly over them. You'll get to see kind of what it looks like. You can also see right ahead of us, we just entered Kenai Fjords National Park. This is kind of a classic U-shaped valley that you would get out of a glacier. So look for that trademark U shape everywhere we're going, and you'll see it keep popping. So the fjords themselves are glacial valleys, like I mentioned, that have, and in Kenai Fjords, what happened is the glaciers carved out these valleys, and then the park itself there was a lot of vague details about how long these processes have been going on in the park, but at over some amount of time, the park and the fjords actually went down. So they kind of started to sink into the ground a little bit more over time, as well as the rising sea levels then started to fill them up. So if we look at some of these fjords, these would be maybe above ground previously, but with the park sinking and the oceans rising, then you end up with these beautiful fjords. So that's sort of like the how it's made sort of aspect of the park. The video mentioned Exit Glacier is one of the most popular destinations. If and when you go and visit the park, you'll see um, Exit Glacier as probably one of the main glaciers you'll go to see because it's right next to the visitor center. It's accessible by the only road in the park is to Exit Glacier. Remainder of the park you can get to by boat, airplane, or hiking. So we are in the exact right airplane for this sort of trip. Also do a quick pan around Kenai Fjords. This is one part of it. One quick note, the game has a little bit of elevation problems with some of the Alaska scenery. Um, so the mountains seem to be okay, but the valleys especially tend to be a little extreme, like this out the window is a little bit lower than I probably is in real life. Um, so I have uh, a download from another member of the sim community who tried to fix a lot of the Alaska scenery and depth maps. And so a lot of it's fixed, but you'll still see some artifacts of that. Okay, so video reminded me a lot of Iceland. Yeah, I'm Rosno. A lot of the same sort of topology going on in all of these. We got flaps down or something. Okay, I'll just bump you through the mountains as we fly in this valley. Okay, so Harding Icefield. We'll do a quick person sidebar, and I feel like I love highlighting one of the named features in each of these streams. So this week we'll talk about Warren Harding, which is what the ice field is named after. He was the 29th president from 1865. I'm sorry, he was born in 1865, died in 1923, and he was president from 1921 to 1923. So he's one of the presidents who died in office. He was a member of the Republican Party, and he was one of the most popular US presidents at that point. After his death, though, a number of scandals, including the Teapot Dome scandal, came to light, as did his extramarital affair with Nan Britton, both of which, and other things, eroded his popular regard. He had a number of cabinet members who were tied to corruption in office, and one of them, Albert Fall, was later convicted of a particular scandal. I believe it was the Teapot Dome scandal, but there was a kind of a laundry list of scandals that came up. These and other scandals greatly damaged Harding's posthumous reputation, and he's generally regarded now as one of the worst presidents. He died of a heart attack in San Francisco while on a Western tour and was succeeded by Vice President Calvin Coolidge. Kind of an interesting example of a character. So they named the field after him because he was supposed to come and visit the park. I couldn't find if he actually went to visit, and all the wording seemed to imply that it was planned and never happened. But yeah. Okay, so last bit about the park then. It was the Kenai Fjords National Monument was initially designated by kind of pan around a little bit by President Jimmy Carter in December 1st of 1978, and it was pending final legislation around the allotment of public lands in Alaska. Establishment of the national park then followed passage of the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act of 1980. So almost every national park we'll visit in Alaska, this particular act will come up, the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act. It created a number of national parks in Alaska. Like I said, it protects the ice field, the fringe. The park is also inhabited by a number of terrestrial and marine mammals, including brown and black bears, moose, sea otters, harbor seals, humpback whales, and killer whales. And here we are now entering Beauty Bay, which I went back and forth on ways to enter the park. Originally, I was going to start in the ice field because it's so important to the park. Oops. Rolling my plane a little bit here. But Beauty Bay is really quite something. All right, so we're going to turn off here. Our next stop is McCarty Ford. Oops, a typo in my waypoint. Okay, well, that's a good one to go and fix. So McCarty Fjord, it's just across the way. Perfect timing there, Fractals. All right, I'm scrolling up to read the chat. Video remote, yeah. All right, Fractals put the next poll up. So our first topic for today, of two topics we'll be covering, is fjords. I kind of had to do it because of Kenai Fjords, and they are significantly more interesting than I expected. So is Puget Sound primarily carved by, that wording doesn't really make sense, but is it primarily fjords carved by glaciers, areas, which is a drowned river, valley, or canyon, means it's carved by a river, or dreams and ambition carved by humans? Give everyone a second to vote. So while everyone's voting, you can see some great examples of fjords all throughout this, one of which is directly in front of us here. So this is the North Arm. McCarty Fjord, our next destination, and ignore the typo, it's McCarty, not McCarthy, is another really good example. So we'll see that. In geology, a fjord is a long, narrow inlet with steep sides or cliffs created by a glacier. This is the key part about fjords, is it's created by a glacier. There are many fjords in the coasts around the world. For instance, Norway's coastline length is estimated to be about 18,000 miles, with nearly 120, with nearly 1,200 fjords. So 18,000 miles of coastline, including the fjords. If you exclude the fjords, it is only 1,600 miles of coastline. So an order of magnitude less coastline in Norway if you exclude those. Which when you see a map, it totally lines up. So a couple of examples. Let's look at one we have here. We're going to see a ton in this flight, but it's useful, I think, to see them from an aerial perspective. And what I found is as soon as I saw a couple of aerial photos, I started seeing fjords all over different countries, anywhere that would potentially have glaciers. So start with the largest, which is in Scoresby Sound. This is in Greenland. So if you look at it, you can see Scoresby Sound is the bottom one here, but the fjords are these glacially carved valleys. You'll hear me potentially say, but you often hear researchers call glaciers rivers of ice. I won't focus on glaciers this stream. That's a good one for another national park. We'll talk a little bit about them just for some background. But you can see in this one, if I zoom in here, you can see the end of the glaciers and you can see how they're carving out just like a river, but really carving into the landscape and creating these enormous fjords. So Scoresby Sound is this one. Also, a quick side note on sounds. I went sound like the geological feature. I went to go and figure out what a sound was relative to a fjord, relative to anything else. The inspiration for the poll, and it turns out that there's a very little consistency in use of sound in the English language. So if you hear sound, it basically means like it's like a inlet of water or something like that. Yeah, a large sea or ocean inlet wider than a fjord is the Wikipedia definition, or a narrow sea or ocean channel between two bodies of land. So it's like kind of covers a lot of ground. The more standard definition of a fjord would be then a flooded glacial valley carved by a glacier, which is a little more standard. So I'll do a little quick pan over the parks. This is all Kenai fjords. Now, if you're in an airplane, this would be your view. From the sea, you can imagine, and we'll do a little bit of a view from the sea, but when you go and take a cruise along the coast, this is kind of be in this inlet a little bit more. I'm actually going to deviate a little bit from our flight pan to point out something else over here. So I'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, so Scoresby Sound, talked a little bit about that. One of the other fjords, one of the deepest fjords, is called the King of Fjords in Norway. It's Sonja Fjord. I practiced that pronunciation, but this is what it looks like on a map, so you get that kind of picture. And then an actual picture of what it looks like in real life. It's sort of like this. So very similar to the sorts of things we're seeing here. All right, Fractal, should we do the results of that poll? Okay, and then the other thing that I'll point out real quick, on this iPad and on the park map, they actually highlight where the edge of the fjord used to be. So that area that Xbox Master just dive bombed into is the 1905 edge of the McCarthy Fjord. And you can zoom out here and see that's how far back the glacier is now. So if we look, switch back to the view so you can see it. Back down in the fjord, up the fjord, this is kind of where the modern glacier is. Where we are now is where it was in 1909. So just to give some context, there's a lot of really cool kind of side-by-side photos of where the glaciers are now versus where they were. So this is McCarty Glacier in 1909 versus 2004. Let's see the difference in location. All right, so a little bit of background on fjords. We talked about some of the places where you'd see them: Greenland, Norway, Chile, tons of others. Quick sidebar on the etymology of fjord. Very brief, I promise. The Old Norse word fjord in many cases refers to any long, narrow body of water, inlet, or channel. From there, it kind of bounced around languages for a little while, from Norse to Scandinavian to German. but it generally shares the same sort of history as the Norse verb meaning traveling or ferry. So the Norse verb ferd, I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, but it's Ferd, meaning traveling or ferrying. And it carries that same origin as ferry. So fjord, ferry, there you go. It also, in a couple of language jumps, connects back to the word ford, like if you're going to ford a river at like a river crossing. So fjord, ford, ford, ferry, it's all in the same sort of realm. Okay, so how was it made? The so you can see, hopefully down this way, you can see the incredible McCarty Fjord. And there's all these little coves and inlets all the way along that you can kind of see in here. Um, each of these is a gorgeous um, little cove in its own right, and they're all over the park. A lot of them have little beaches and landings you can go. So if you go and kayak around the park, which I would also highly recommend based on what I was learning, that would be a pretty cool thing to go and spend some time on is jumping between these different coasts. That's a nice fjord, Jay Vanetis. It is a nice fjord, JS. Um, okay, straw poll results. Carved by Glaciers, 1 votes for Glaciers, 3 votes for Ria's Rivers, and 4 votes for Human Ambition, which is a pretty good guess. We will talk about which of the 3 it was in a little bit when we get to the end of Fjords. Fractals I drove. Fjord pick'em truck. Incredible. Um, wouldn't that be something? Uh, Ford a river, Ford the truck. Anyway, okay. So I wonder if Ford a river and the Ford company have a relation. They probably do. That's a topic for another day. Okay, so how are they made? We talked a little bit about how they're carved from glaciers. If you've never seen a glacier time lapse, actually, let me just pull one up. That's just going to be much better. Because what happens is essentially the ice of a glacier flows down like a river. It just flows very, very slowly. And so, um, and so you have to wait a long, long time to get the kinds of um, views that we're seeing now. So let me load up what one looks like. This is a time lapse. It's about 6 seconds long, so I'll play it a couple of times. Um, it's a little grainy. The actual video itself is pretty small too. So you can kind of see it. You can see the ice flowing down. This is over the course of about 3 months. I'll play that one more time so you can see it. So you'll notice that the ice is actually just kind of flowing down like a slow-mo river. So that's how a glacier moves. Let me flip back here so I can make sure I'm not gonna run this plane into a ground by accident. Okay, we're kind of at the end of McCarty Fjord, and McCarty Glacier is just over there. We'll get plenty of time at the glaciers, so we're gonna make our way up to Northwestern Fjord. Do a little bit of climbing here real quick. I'm watching a couple of dials on here. So this quick sidebar on airplanes, this white arc is where you're allowed to use flaps in the airplane. And if you start to get to the low end of the white arc, that means that you're likely going to stall the plane, so it'll stop flying. And I don't really want to do that at any point, but uh, hopefully not while I'm watching a video. That would be pretty bad. Some in-flight entertainment. Okay, so when a fjord is actually created, this is sort of what happens. The glacier moves down this valley, and as it's moving, it carves out underneath it. I like this picture a lot because I think it does a good job of explaining the core concept of what's going on. What I don't like about it is it kind of it implies that the glacier is pushing the ground along, and that's actually not what's happening. So again, we'll do glaciers another day, but the 2 second version of it is the glacier is actually, as a little bit of water melts, that melted water goes under the ground or into the ground, and it can get underneath big boulders or rocks or other things. As that water freezes again, it'll crack the rock loose, and then the glacier will pick it up. After the glacier's picked up that kind of rock material or other sediment, it bounces around along the bottom surface, and it will erode just like sandpaper, but like really, really heavy grit sandpaper along the bottom. So it's this combination of plucking up rocks and then abrasion that actually carves out the glacier. So a good picture for describing kind of what happens, at least conceptually, but it's not my favorite for others. I know, right? Garrett, that was my reaction, and it just happens slowly and with big rocks. Um, so and little rocks too, all sorts. Okay. So this same basic process is actually what happened in Yosemite last week. So I didn't talk about glaciers in Yosemite either, but in that same park, it was carved out. The difference here is that when the um, land retreated, and I'll flip this back up, the sea was above the edge of the fjord, the edge of the valley, and so it just flooded. And that's basically the difference. So if Yosemite was on the ocean and it was below sea level, then you would have ended up with a fjord. Um, And in particular, let me pull up two things actually. So we're about to be, let's see, we're coming up on Two Arm Bay actually right now. So this is a great time for it. So you might remember last week we had this hanging valley, this waterfall that was created because Bridevale Falls. This is in Yosemite because the glacier carved out along and it left this hanging wall, right? Glacier up Bridevale, glacier up the main valley. If we look then at the waterfalls in Kenai, so this is a waterfall in Kenai, it's the exact same thing. It's this hanging valley. Glacier came in, carved it up. When it retreated, then it just left this sort of hanging wall there where you get a waterfall. So just like Yosemite, this park is littered with beautiful waterfalls. Now we're crossing the mountain range here. Let's see that we're clear of all of our terrain. Let's do a quick view around these mountains. Hey there, a little formation flying going on. Oof. Okay, so you feel that. Well, you feel that. You see the plane was rocking a lot. So that's as you pass over the crest of mountains, the airflow ripples just like waves, and so you get all this kind of turbulence. That's why if you fly over the Rockies, it'll sometimes be like that. So that waterfall photo I just showed is down in this valley right here. I'll do a little dip. Let me see if I can find it. It's like right back in there. This is Two Arm Bay. Okay, so we have this glacier. It's moved in, plucking in abrasion, and it's clearing out the valley. And as it keeps, and then it fills out the full valley, right? So we get this really long sort of arm going on. What happens next is as the glacier retreats, there's sort of two different things that start to occur. One of them is that the earth is no longer weighed down by the very heavy ice. And so because the earth is no longer weighed down, it starts to do what's called rebounding. And so the ice was heavy enough to be pushing the earth down, and then as the glacier melts away, it starts to come back up. I grabbed a picture not in Kenai, but I thought it was a really good representation of what this looks like. So you can see each time the glacier retreated a little bit, the earth rebounded, and in this case, it actually left these sort of lines each time. So if the earth rebounds enough that the fjord is not under the sea level, then it just becomes a valley, sort of like Yosemite. If it doesn't rebound enough, then oh, and the other force. So one thing is the earth rebounds, lifts the water or the earth up. Also, as the glacier melts, then you have rising sea levels, and so you have this sort of earth is rising, but also the sea is rising as the glacier retreats. And so whichever one happens more dramatically in the area, then it determines whether or not you'll end up with a fjord or not. So, let me see if I missed anything else. No, that's kind of it with the glaciers. There's, like I said, there's a ton more to glaciers. We'll talk about them another day. Like all of this stuff in the mountains is kind of a different type of glacier, and is really really interesting. But we have Glacier Bay and Glacier National Park to talk about those more. Okay, so the last piece on here then is those other planes flying with you. They are, yeah. So Xbox Master is one of the folks in the Discord, so he's flying around, dipping in and out. When I do community fly-ins, that is how I fly, for the record. Because if I have all the safeties off in an airplane, I'm going to go and dip in and weave among mountains, being a little more gentle here. But yeah, Xbox Master is one of the your folks. Xbox Master, you can do barrel rolls and I'm totally blanking on the name of the other one. You can, like, if you just pull back on the yoke, the plane will do its own kind of loop. So yeah, good luck. Have fun with that one. Okay, let me pull in here. So we're about to enter the northwestern fjord. So this is going to be one of our first glaciers. We can kind of see the start of the glacier. And let me see if I can change the lighting. So I did a lot of playing with times of day, and I almost forgot that. Notice how the light, no matter what time of day I go to, is always backlit like that. It's because it's the winter in the Arctic, and so we only have like 4 hours of sunlight to deal with right now. So okay, let me do this real quick so I can actually do a quick pause break and actually look outside. So Northwest Fjord, you can see the glacier off in the distance there, and you can actually see sort of the terminal end of the glacier. And then this is where the glacier has retreated and carved out some of the area down to a lake, and then it goes in, or this is just connected straight to the fjord. This is the northwestern fjord. Let me pull up real quick what a picture of this looks like so you can see it. In the real world, it's sort of like that. Very pretty fjord. This is one of the ones that I would go and visit over there. Go fly in this plane then. Quick fly into the side of the mountain. Okay, there we go. Oh yeah, the other thing about fjords. So I mentioned that they have that sort of. Are you hearing that sync rate, by the way? I turned off audio this time, so that should be fixed. I'll wait for the thumbs up from the wife that it's not a problem. But not a problem. All right, sounds good. Cool. Um, so so I mentioned when the fjords are created, right? They have this sort of shape to them. Well, you'll notice at the edge here that there's all these little rocks, and then there's this sort of ridge. That ridge is something that forms very distinctly at the edge of where the glacier went. So the point at which it kind of stopped being able to really erode um, is what you're seeing at those edge. Well, that lip creates a lot of water flow across a very narrow channel. And when you have water flow like that, you end up with very, very strong currents. Oh, jeez, okay. Um, Thank you. Um, so you end up with very strong currents. And so with those kinds of currents, I'm going to pull up a current video from one of the worst currents that you can find in any of the fjords. And this is from one in, I'm totally blanking on where, but I bet the video will say where it is. We'll flip back here. There's another language in the background for speaking, so hopefully it's appropriate. So this is what's called well, it's whirlpools or a maelstrom. My pronunciation might be off on that. And so the basically what's happening is the current passing over the mouth of the fjord, like we were just talking about, is so strong that it creates these really, really intense currents and whirlpools that go back and forth as the tide comes in and out from these different areas. So it can be actually a really dangerous place to be if you're at the mouth of the fjord, especially if you don't really know where the mouth is. But it can also be a really cool place to go and see. Okay, let me change back to here. Okay, what else? Okay, so that's kind of currents around the fjord. We'll do a little look back here. So you got another glacier kind of peeking out down there. Lots and lots of coves like we were talking about. So we're going to fly out to the Chiswell Islands now, which are not technically part of the park, but they're a really good place to kind of see the bigger picture. And on our way there, let's see, there's just a bit more about fjords that was kind of interesting. And then we'll talk about the Puget Sound question. So fjords can be these really rich estuary ecosystems that mix of salt and fresh water. The video at the beginning mentioned that because glaciers kind of sandpaper their way down the valley, it creates all of this really rich mineral runoff. That mineral runoff is called rock flour. That mineral runoff then lands in the water and it provides what's necessary for phytoplankton. So this is that mineral runoff, that rock flour, in a different park, but a good example. And when it gets to the water, then phytoplankton are able to consume that, and that creates big algae blooms, which then provide all of the raw food needed for the rest of the ecosystem. And so you'll notice in some of the areas of the park that it kind of has a blue color to it. That I'll try and point one out if I see one. I know there's a lagoon that I think we fly around. But that kind of blue turquoise, that turquoisey color is what that comes from. Thanks, Fractals. Yeah, I love to assume earnest questions, but I appreciate the intervention. Okay, so fjords. I'm talking about how they are glacially carved valleys. There's a different kind of valley though that can occur, which is when it's non-glacially carved, something that would be carved by a river, for instance. That's called a ria, R-I-A. So the fjord would be a glacially carved. Ria's not glacially carved. It's also known as a drowned river or a canyon. Drowned river canyon or a drowned river valley are the two different names you'll get for it. Do a quick pan around here and see if there's any. There's a lot of little bays and inlets over here. Keep my plane on course. So you would typically see like a tree line sort of look, just like you would see at a river delta from a ria. And it often results in a very irregular indented coastline. The other thing about rias is you often, kind of like fjords, you'll get these naturally occurring islands. Sometimes not naturally occurring if humans go and fill them in for populated places. But there's a couple of really famous examples, one of which is Sydney Harbor. So if you look at it, it has some of those same like essence of fjord feels, but it's actually from a river delta, and so a river was carving into the land, and then something happened where the either sea levels rose or the land dropped, and now it's filled with water, and so you get this sort of like kind of flooded area. Another example of that is Chesapeake Bay, and so you can see it really, really clearly here where the river would have been, and it's now just a flooded area. So as you can imagine, glaciers require colder weather, and so they're more common. Fjords are more common in the north, and rias are more common in the lower latitudes, or I'm sorry, in the higher latitudes. So north or south, you're more common to see fjords. Bring in the power on this plane a little bit. I'm just slowly trucking along. Other common drowned valleys you'll encounter: New York Harbor. So New York, if you go and look at the area around New York, Manhattan Island, all that kind of stuff, you can kind of see the river as it used to be. And San Francisco Bay. So San Francisco Bay is a drowned valley as well. It has an ancient underground river, I found out. So, all right, so back to the trivia question then. Puget Sound is a fjord system that used to be covered by glacial valleys. And so unlike Kenai Fjords, where the ice originated at the center of the park and is kind of flowing outwards, in Puget Sound, it sort of came up from further north and then carved into the land a little bit. But it is. So Puget Sound, call it a fjord system. You can bug your friends from up there if you're so inclined. So in summary on fjords, they're formed by glaciers, carved by the landscape over eons. They can produce unique and rich ecosystems, not to mention stunning views, as I pan around my airplane with glass ceiling. They provide rich and unique ecosystems, and much like the valley through my pile of clothes in our bedroom, slowly it will be carved out, and when it is, it will be stunning. All right. The other piece of this, we talked about phytoplankton, we talked about the rich ecosystem, and the video mentioned humpback whales. Fractals, you want to throw up the humpback whale poll? It's a lot of text in this one, so I think the poll will work, and if it doesn't, we'll wing it. It'll be fine. Okay, so why do humpback whales sing? So scientists aren't sure, but most likely to get the lady whales in the mood and to show dominance over other males. Scientists aren't sure, but likely as vocal warm-ups before their presentations, before live streaming, all the whales. Scientists aren't sure, but singing is a good way to express your emotions, so maybe that. Give people a second to vote. Cooter Casey, get the thinking face, yep. All right, so while people are voting, what is it? A humpback whale is a species of baleen whale, has that kind of weird baleen teeth. It's one of the larger rorqual species, which is the same group that includes the same species that includes the blue whale. Adults range in length from about 39 to 52 feet, and they weigh about 30 tons. Their lifespan is about 45 to 100 years, and they have a distinctive body shape with large pectoral fins and a knobbly head. Knobbly. There's your new buzzword about whales. So that is a humpback whale. You also saw one earlier in the video. A lot of really interesting things going on in that photo, and by the end, you'll see a couple of them. One of the things is that they do this behavior called breaching, which is actually what was shown. So that jumping out of the water, they have a whole set of other unique surface behaviors. I'll pull up a couple of photos we can look at. But that's one of the reasons that they're so popular with whale watchers, is you get to see all these really cool different behaviors. Look back in the fjord here. You get some of these outlet islands. You can see them on the map pretty clearly. Oops, there we go. We'll zoom that back in so the tiles show up. These islands out here are like birds' paradise. So all the birds come and land and nest here. I decided to do humpback whales instead of birds, but there's a ton of interesting for you bird watchers out there. All right, what are the results here? 3 votes for lady whales, 2 votes for warm up before presentations. Good guess. And then expressing your emotions, 3 votes. So the truth of the matter is scientists aren't sure. So I ended up just putting that at the beginning of all of them. The running theory, and we'll talk a little bit about what this looks like in practice in a minute, but the running theory is that they do it to get lady whales in the mood or to show dominance over other males. Sort of a hybrid set of behavior going on. Speaking of which, the males produce a complex song that lasts about 10 to 20 minutes, and then they repeat that song for hours at a time. So why do whales sing? To get the lady whales in the mood, and they do that by singing the same song, 10 minutes long, for hours. Different species, I suppose. All the males in the group produce the same song, and that song changes every season. So you hear a bunch of whales, all the males will be singing the same song. They're found in oceans and seas all over the world, just like the kind of widespread nature of the peregrine falcons we learned about in Acadia. Humpback whales are kind of similar in that you can find them everywhere. They typically migrate up to 16,000 miles each year. They feed in polar waters like Kenai Fjords because of the rich plankton, and then they'll migrate to tropical or subtropical waters to breed and give birth. And then they fast, and while they're giving birth, they fast and live off their fat reserves. So migrate up north to feed, and then go down to the tropics to give birth. Not a bad way to do it. Their diet consists of mostly krill and small fish. Humpbacks have a diverse rapport of feeding methods, including the bubble net technique, which we'll talk about in 2 seconds. And like other large whales, they were a target for the whaling industry. So they were once hunted to the brink of extinction. The population fell by an estimated about 90%. And then in 1966, there was a moratorium placed on the whales. The stocks have partially recovered to about 80,000 animals worldwide. But there's still issues with entanglements in fishing gear, collisions with ships, noise pollution, that sort of thing. So actually, if you're flying your airplane in national parks, you are asked to keep, I think there's a minimum separation of 1,000 feet above ground, above sea level, above ground, excuse me, yep. But they recommend 2,000 for noise, partially for animals like the humpback whale. So, all right, so let me play a video, and I will play it once with sound, and then I will reference it. Which server? It is US A West. Okay, let me see if I can get this up real quick. Oops, gotta do my order of operations here. So this one is that playing right now? Hopefully not. So just a quick attribution. So that's the original post. So thank you. I try to make sure that my open source stuff. Oop, it is playing now. Okay, I'll restart that. So this is a couple of reasons I want to show this. Actually, let me pause this flight so I can focus on the video. So a couple of reasons I want to show this, and I'll kind of comment as we go. You'll hear the whale song in the background though. So notice the long fins. Goodbye, whale. Okay, so a couple of things let me point out in this video, and hopefully it's muted. So one thing to see is the eyes. So you'll see the eye right here, this little thing right at the end of the mouth. And when you see the whales breach and feed, remember that their eye is right at the end of the mouth. It's a very weird location for it. The other thing to point out is the pectoral fins, which are huge. So this is one of the big things about the whale. Okay, so those fins can be up to a third of the length of the whale's body. Let me get flying here again. Okay, so we're going to turn in from the islands and hopefully get some really nice views along the bay here as we go. Oops. Fractals, no worry. Visual. Oh, thank you. The wife coming to the rescue. Sorry about that. Aviation RC, I am at the Chiswell Islands waypoint if you're looking for where we are. Just about to head towards the Bear Glacier view. It's about halfway through the flight plan, not through the stream. We got about 10 minutes left in the stream. The flight plans are longer for, anyway. Okay, so there are several hypotheses about these super long fins that they have, these surprisingly long ones. And they're proportionally the longest fins of any kind of similar animal. One of them is the higher maneuverability afforded by long fins is useful, and it allows them to, because they have increased surface area, they can use that to regulate temperature when they go from cold areas to warm areas. Remember, they migrate through the winter and summer. The other thing is those pectoral fins were really knobby, and so at the edge of them, they can use them actually as weapons, basically, and so they can hit orcas, killer whales, really, in confrontation and try and push them off. The other thing that can be going on is the whale itself will get covered in these sharp cornered barnacles, and they'll actually attach at the knuckles of the fin. And so if you imagine this humpback whale is swimming along, and it's basically got brass knuckles on the edge of its fin that it can then go and hit off predators. Let me show you what that looks like real quick. Those are those barnacles on the edge of the fin. It's kind of a gnarly looking thing. So you can imagine that coming right at you would get you out of the way pretty quick. All right, we'll do a quick look over at Kenai Fjords. This is sort of the distant view of it. Let me see. This is Chiswell Islands, by the way, just while we're flying over it. That's sort of what it looks like in real life. The game has it very, very tree heavy. The real thing is a little more rocky. You may remember that as a excellent habitat for peregrine falcons, who do live up here as well. Okay, oh, and the other one, let's see, we're coming in, yeah, just down the way here. So if I look off to my left, sort of out in the distance, you can see that really deep fjord going on. So that is Ailek Bay. I might have gotten that pronunciation wrong. And down in there, you'll have Ailek and Pedersen glaciers, which look like this. So if you go on an Alaskan cruise, this is often one of the ones they will take you to, especially Ailek, because it's got this really cool glacial structure that you can go and get relatively close to on a cruise ship. Pedersen, let me pull that up real quick so you can see this one, just a different view of that Pedersen Bay. I wanted to highlight this photo in particular because in the game, it's easy to assume that it's not very accurate, which is probably a fair assumption most of the time. But my imagination of Kenai was a lot of ice, and the reality of Kenai is a lot of ice in the ice field, but everywhere else there's a lot of very interesting and green nature going on. So I want to grab this one, plus you can see the kayakers. Right. Thank you. Perfect. And then Fractals, you want to post up that vote here for this next national park? Let me see if we're gonna miss. I picked a slow plane, which is intentional because this is kind of a good plane for this flight. Um, but we'll zip along if we need to. We can get the last 5 minutes here. So, all right. So, like I mentioned with the singing, scientists aren't super sure on why they do it, but they believe that it has to do with helping induce estrus in female, excuse me, which I worry I mispronounced. And it also may be used to establish male dominance. We talked about. You can imagine they're underwater singing at each other, trying to get the female, and it reminded me a lot of sort of an underwater rap battle. So that was my takeaway. The other thing, when humpback whales are trying to mate, they follow along the female and they battle it out. They will do things like breaching, spy hopping, tail lobbing, tail slapping. Let me show you. There's just all these breaching behaviors. Can you thread through the arch? I can fly through the arch. Um, Good question. So that's tail slapping. There's pectoral fin slapping. We get breaching. So this is what a breaching sequence looks like. This is spinner breaching, where they kind of do a little twist a loop. You can get spy hopping, which is where they poke their eye out a little bit. You can see all the barnacles on there. So very active and interesting whale to watch. The other thing that they do is this thing called bubble net feeding. And bubble net feeding, oops, this is baleen. Okay, well, I'll show this anyway. So this is their teeth looks like this. This is that baleen that I mentioned earlier. So they kind of go in, and essentially what they do is let's see, I might have two of the same photo. Oh, that's unfortunate. This is bubble neck is really cool. Okay, but I can find it in about 2 seconds. I'll try and find a picture of what the bubble neck feeding looks like afterwards, because it's really a pretty neat thing to see. But the idea is that a bunch of whales get together and they actually create a net of about 98 feet by shooting bubbles around prey. And so a bunch of whales get together and they're creating this kind of bubble net that traps all the prey inside of it. And then some whales will go below and they'll blow bubbles to kind of get the prey stuck in there. And eventually then all of the whales, once all the fish are trapped in this bubble net, all the whales will swim through at once and go and grab all the fish. And there's a photo that is really cool of that, which I mislinked, and so I'll have to go and grab a second. But I'll do that at the end of the stream. So that's sort of the idea behind bubble net feeding, isn't it? A unique way of doing it. The other thing about humpback whales, you can tell them apart, just like how we have our fingerprints. You can tell a humpback whale apart by the whale tail. So the pattern on the tail is distinct, and scientists can use that to figure out which whales are where and what's going on in the whale's life. Okay, so in summary, humpback whales are a very showy baleen whale. You can catch them singing and jumping for the females, as well as using bubble nets to catch fish. You can tell individuals apart by their whale tails, a trick that also works for your next trip to Bourbon Street. I'm not going to explain that joke, but if you know Bourbon Street, then it makes sense. All right, what do we get fractals for that poll? These are all the three, besides the one that just got announced like 2 days ago, these are the three most recent national parks. All right, well, Fractals is getting those poll results out. Do a quick sign off here. So thank you so much for joining me and for joining us today. The National Park, Kenai Fjords National Park, is gorgeous. I will do a little zip here off to the next part of the park so you can see sort of the waypoints where we're going. We also talked a little bit about fjords, talked a little bit about humpback whales. So this is Bear Glacier, which looks like that. If you go, this is the largest glacier, so it's huge. It goes all the way back. Fractals already posted the survey in the chat, so go ahead and check that out if you get a second. I always appreciate the input. It's useful for me to make the stream more what you're looking for. This is Resurrection Bay that we're entering. This is the town of Seward. It's just at the end of Resurrection Bay. Beautiful little area. And then Exit Glacier is right here. We'll let that load a second because I just zipped, so it has to actually buffer some stuff. Let me see. What did we get for votes? We got 4 for Gateway Arch. Okay. 0 for Indiana Dunes. Poor Indiana Dunes. And then White Sands National Park for 2. All right. Gateway National Park. All right. chance, bro. I can go a little long, but I do want to make sure I finish up on time. It's gotta have that schedule going, right? So thank you, Fractals. There's a survey for input. I do appreciate the input. There's Discord if you want to join the Discord community and kind of chat outside of the stream, meet other people who are watching. And then if you just want notifications about it, Twitter's a great way to do it. All right, we'll finish off here then with the Harding ice field, which you can see is massive. You can see some of the glaciers off in the distance here. This is sort of the aerial view of the park. Okay, so next week we're going to Gateway Arch National Park, also the smallest park in the country. So I'll figure out how to make that work. But it should be a blast. It's a pretty cool little park. So thank you all very much. I'm excited to explore that next week with you. With that, thank you all for being my co-pilot today. Until we meet again, keep on exploring. All right, I'll stay around for like 2 seconds to do the last little bit here. You can see this is Glacier entering into Harding. And then just the carved out landscape of Alaska. So, all right, thanks everyone. See you next week.